3 years before September 11th, the U.S. Congress voted 360 to 38 to make removing Saddam Hussein official American policy. This was not random. It was a chain reaction. So how did a contained dictator become the target of a full-scale invasion? The real turning point came after the fall of Baghdad, not before it. By the end, you will understand every motive that sent America to war in Iraq. On August 2, 1990, Iraqi tanks rolled into Kuwait, setting off a crisis that would reshape the Middle East for decades. The U.S.-led coalition responded with Operation Desert Shield, building up forces in Saudi Arabia, and then launched Desert Storm on January 17, 1991. In just 6 weeks, coalition air and ground power forced Saddam Hussein's army out of Kuwait. But the war left Saddam in power, and the question of how to contain him became a permanent fixture of U.S. policy. The ceasefire wasn't just a handshake. United Nations Security Council Resolution 687 demanded that Iraq dismantle its chemical, biological, and nuclear programs and allow inspectors full access. To enforce these terms, the coalition imposed strict economic sanctions that blocked most trade, froze assets, and limited Iraq's oil sales. The goal was to squeeze Saddam's regime without launching another full-scale war. Military pressure never disappeared. The U.S. and Britain enforced no-fly zones over northern and southern Iraq, Operation Provide Comfort in the north and Operation Southern Watch in the south, patrolling Iraqi skies and striking back whenever Iraqi air defenses fired. These patrols prevented Saddam from using air power against Kurdish and Shia populations, but also kept Iraq under constant surveillance and threat. Over the next decade, the sanctions regime and no-fly zones became the instruments of containment. Yet neither tool could solve the core problem. Saddam's government survived. The regime adapted, using black markets and smuggling to blunt the impact of sanctions. Meanwhile, the Iraqi people suffered severe shortages of food and medicine, fueling international criticism and humanitarian concerns. By the late 1990s, Iraq remained boxed in, but not defanged. The containment strategy created a tense standoff, with repeated confrontations over weapons inspections and sporadic airstrikes. The Gulf War had ended the occupation of Kuwait, but it left behind a legal and military framework that kept Iraq on Washington's radar and left open the question of what would finally resolve the standoff. On October 31, 1998, President Bill Clinton signed the Iraq Liberation Act into law, transforming the United States' approach from containment to a formal policy of regime change. The House passed the bill by an overwhelming margin, 360 in favor, 38 against, while the Senate approved it by unanimous consent. The act stated in clear language that it should be the policy of the United States to support efforts to remove Saddam Hussein from power. This was not just a symbolic gesture. Congress authorized up to $97 million in military and logistical aid for Iraqi opposition groups, including the Iraqi National Congress, with the stated goal of promoting a democratic transition. For nearly a decade, the United States had relied on sanctions, weapons inspections, and no-fly zones to contain Saddam's regime. Frustration over Saddam's survival and repeated standoffs with UN inspectors led lawmakers to push for something more decisive. The Iraq Liberation Act laid out a new legal framework, and the United States was now officially committed to backing opposition forces and seeking the removal of Iraq's leadership. This policy was not the result of a single administration's agenda. The act passed with broad bipartisan support, reflecting a growing consensus in Washington that containment alone was not enough. The law required annual reports on progress toward a democratic Iraq, signaling that regime change had become a standing priority, not just a campaign slogan. By the end of the 1990s, the question was no longer whether the United States wanted Saddam gone, but how and when it would act on that goal. September 11, 2001, changed the way American leaders thought about threats. In a single morning, nearly 3,000 people were killed in attacks on New York and Washington. The sense of safety that had defined daily life vanished. For the first time in decades, the possibility of a catastrophic attack on American soil was no longer abstract. Inside the White House, President George W. Bush and his advisors faced a new reality. Enemies didn't need armies or borders to strike. The old strategy of containing adversaries, waiting, watching, and reacting, now seemed dangerously slow. Within weeks, Congress passed the authorization for use of military force, giving the president sweeping power to target those responsible for 9/11 and any nation that harbored them. This was not a narrow hunt for al-Qaeda. It was a blank check for preemptive action, justified by the fear that the next attack could be even worse. By October 2002, the House and Senate granted Bush the authority to use force against Iraq as well. The vote was not close. It was 296 to 133 in the House and 77 to 23 in the Senate. The message was clear. Waiting for perfect intelligence was now seen as a risk America could not afford. In the months that followed, the Bush administration released the 2002 National Security Strategy. It spelled out a doctrine of preemption. The United States would strike first if it believed a threat was gathering, not just after being attacked. This was a sharp break from decades of Cold War thinking. Iraq, once treated as a problem to be managed, was now recast as a potential source of catastrophic danger. The groundwork was laid for a new approach, one that prioritized action over patience and prevention over containment. The next step would be convincing the public that Iraq fit this new threat model. By late 2002, the case for war focused on Iraq's alleged weapons of mass destruction. The administration's argument rested on three main claims. First, the aluminum tubes. CIA analysts insisted these tubes matched those used in nuclear centrifuges, and the October 2002 National Intelligence Estimate called it highly likely that Iraq sought them for a nuclear program. Yet within the CIA, technical experts warned the tubes could fit conventional rockets. British intelligence echoed that uncertainty, but public statements rarely reflected these doubts. Second, the mobile biological weapons labs. Officials described trucks designed to manufacture deadly agents, citing satellite images and intercepted calls. But CIA memos labeled the evidence speculative, and UN inspectors found only ambiguous equipment, no proof of labs as described. Third, the Niger uranium story. The claim was that Iraq tried to buy uranium from Africa to restart its nuclear program. This allegation relied on a single document that was later exposed as a forgery. Both CIA and British analysts flagged problems, but the story still appeared in official reports. President Bush's January 2003 State of the Union address included the phrase 16 words referencing uranium from Africa. That line was removed after CIA Director George Tenet intervened. On February 5, 2003, Secretary of State Colin Powell addressed the United Nations Security Council. He presented images of supposed mobile labs and described intercepted messages, aiming to persuade skeptical allies that Iraq posed an urgent threat. UN inspectors, led by Hans Blix, reported no clear evidence. France, Russia, and Germany pushed for more inspections. The Security Council split. No new resolution passed. The U.S. and Britain declared Iraq's defiance justified military action, while critics questioned the legal basis and the evidence. The public case for invasion was set, driven by certainty in speeches, and shadowed by doubts in classified files. Within weeks of Baghdad's fall, the CPA issued two sweeping directives that would reshape Iraq overnight. On May 16, 2003, CPA Order No. 1 removed more than 25,000 former Ba'ath Party officials from all government jobs, from ministers down to school principals. Just one day later, CPA Order No. 2 dissolved the Iraqi military and security services, instantly disbanding around 452,000 soldiers and officers. In a country where the state was the main employer, this meant hundreds of thousands of people lost their livelihoods in a matter of days. Paul Bremer, the American administrator, insisted, "We will rebuild Iraq from the ground up." But the effect was a sudden vacuum of authority. Police stations stood empty. Borders went unguarded. With so many trained armed men now jobless and angry, the stage was set for unrest, and the rise of organized resistance. The collapse of Iraq's security forces left a void that armed groups rushed to fill. Insurgents, once scattered, launched coordinated attacks against coalition troops and Iraqi civilians. By 2007, the Iraq Body Count Project had recorded over 200,000 violent deaths, while independent studies estimated even higher tolls. Sectarian militias fought for control of neighborhoods, and car bombs became a daily threat in Baghdad and beyond. The violence forced millions from their homes. At the height of the conflict, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees tracked 4.5 million Iraqis displaced inside the country or living as refugees abroad. This chaos didn't stay within Iraq's borders. Iran, freed from its old rival, expanded its influence by funding and training powerful Shia militias, shifting the region's balance of power. Extremist groups, including Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the forerunner of ISIS, gained ground by exploiting the instability. The World Bank later estimated the total cost of the war and its aftermath in the trillions of dollars, a burden still felt today. The human cost, the rise of new threats, and the reshaping of regional alliances all trace back to the decisions made in the months after the invasion. Today, the war's ripple effects still shape global alliances, oil markets, and public trust. The search for a single motive never fit the evidence. It was only a web of overlapping ambitions. As debates over intervention continue, one fact remains: credibility once lost is far harder to rebuild than it is to destroy.